coming. Supposed to be on the
Pack it up.
Right.
Just pack it up.
Oh, yeah, it's all on.
I'll be right back.
I'm happy that it's nice and cold there.
Yeah.
Chairs.
You should start. 7:03.
Oh, well, you wouldn't know, they're black. All right. Good evening. I'd like to call this March 4th meeting of the Northfield Township Planning Commission to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, please call the roll, Mr. Stanalajczo.
Mr. Iaquinto?
Here.
Mr. Dignan?
He's absent with notice.
Okay. Ms. Chick?
Here.
Ms. Chalkley?
Here.
Mr. Stanalajczo here. Mr. Kuzno?
Here.
And Mr. Roman?
Here.
Okay, thank you. We do have a quorum, and we do have some members of the public here, and our recording secretary, Lisa Lembo, and our township planner, who will be in the room in just a minute. So you have the agenda before you. I'd like to make one adjustment to it. I would like to move the minutes underneath the policy review and discussion, since we're, it'd be better to take care of that sooner. If that's all right with everyone, let's have a motion.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as amended, or I'm sorry, I apologize, the agenda as amended.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Iaquinto and support by Ms. Chick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay, thank you. All right. Now we have an opportunity for call to the public, and I see we do have some members of the public here. If you'd like to address the Planning Commission, please come up to the podium make sure the mic is on, state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes to say whatever's on your mind. And I will show you the yellow when 30 seconds is left, and the red when 3 minutes is up. And so when you see the red, please finish your sentence and go sit down. But thank you all for coming. And does anyone have anything they'd like to say? Not on.
It's on. Says it's on. Here we go. David Gordon, 5558 Helena Road. I just had a couple of points I wanted to make. I was reading an article about the Federal Reserve lately and how people are attacking it because they think it needs more oversight. And it certainly might need more oversight, I'm not sure. But the point that was brought up in the article that I read said that it's important that the Federal Reserve have some insulation from the Congress so that the federal monetary policy in this country doesn't fluctuate wildly based on whoever gets elected to office. When I was serving on the Planning Commission for 6 years and took a lot of seminars in Lansing to learn about the job of being a planning commissioner, one of the things that was stressed is that there should be some insulation between the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees. Same sort of thing where you don't have a Planning Commission that's supposed to be looking 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road for the plan of the community to be affected by whoever happened to get elected that particular cycle. And I think that's something you might want to keep in mind when you're making the considerations for the any possible changes to the master plan that you're looking at right now, because just in the last 3 administrations we've seen big changes, each since I served, then somebody else came in, and then most of those people went out and another group was in. And it's going to happen again in 2016. So what you're doing as the planner is much more important than who happens to be in office, and even though the current administration represents a particular viewpoint, it doesn't mean that that's what the Planning Commission should be altering its plan to meet. Just something to consider. I got an email just before I got here from the planning chair, and I understand, Madam Chair, that you are very interested in trying to be as proactively involved in communicating with the public as possible. I was disturbed by one phrase in here which says that even though you'd like to respond to individual emails, quote, appointed officials are discouraged from engaging in private conversations concerning public business with community members. I never learned that when I was serving. I thought that the communication between appointed and elected officials and the public was integral to the job. So I would hope that that kind of communication continues between the public and the members that are serving on this panel. I did read the article which you have here available to us that you are going to have in the Courant, and I appreciate what you had to say in it. I understand what you're trying to say there. There is a problem with putting it in the Courant, however, because there's a lot of people. First of all, it's not the paper of record for this community. Second of all, it's so highly biased that many people fail to even look at it because of the one-sided nature of most of its reporting, and it doesn't really do a good job of reporting. Even in the January issue, our township manager, Mr. Fink, had the bottom half of the paper to give us the Northfield Neighbor News, or Northfield Township News. He wasn't even identified as the township manager. He was identified as a contributing writer. That's improper, certainly from a perspective of a newspaper. So I would just recommend that possibly you would like to have the dialogue and have this information available. Possibly we could put it on the website for the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on, we have correspondence. I did get a couple letters from, in the past couple weeks from members of the public about development. So Mr. Kleinschmidt sent something, and Cecilia Infante sent something, and then that's all all I've received. So I have nothing else for correspondence. Anyone else receive anything different? No? Okay. Reports, we'll move on to Board of Trustees report. Ms. Chick.
Board of Trustees held a workshop on February 24th. Some items of discussion were the employee handbook revision. There was a preliminary discussion we will continue to have. Also, the establishment of formal job descriptions for employees along with pay rates linked to job performance and cost of living so the township can attract and maintain quality staffing in a competitive market. As we discussed at our last Planning Commission meeting, I brought up the upcoming capital improvement plan for 2015 and asked the board to consider if they would like to take this on as their responsibility or prefer to keep it with the Planning Commission. It will be on the next board agenda for a vote. Okay, and
To discuss or to work on?
to vote.
To vote on, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sewer capacity study was also on the agenda. There was no new information at the time. Tim Hardesty indicated things were moving along. We may have a presentation from Tetra Tech this month if they are ready. And then I also commented to the board that the Planning Commission would be asking for funds for an upcoming master plan update soon, so just to get them ready. Okay, and then the board also held a retreat on February 26th at the Links of Biltmore. Howard Fink acted as facilitator. Board members submitted the goals and projects they'd like to see the board achieve for 2015. The board, by consensus, determined the top items to be accomplished, and we will be working on those in 2015.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, CBA, Mr. Dignan's not here today, so there will be no report. Staff report, do you have anything to share with us, Mr. Fink? No?
Unless there's any questions. No, ma'am.
No? Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lewan, planning consultant report, please.
The Nowatzki project continues to make progress, slowly but surely. They hope to resubmit their project on Friday, and so hopefully we will be getting done with the detailed engineering part of the project. I heard just yesterday, they had an agreement with the Washtenaw County Road Commission for road improvements that will be required. So that just occurred yesterday at a county commissioners meeting, or a road commissioners meeting. And aside from that, we've had various and sundry development questions and meetings here at the township offices, but nothing that has resulted in a submittal at this point.
Okay. So we're not likely to see it in 2 weeks, is that correct?
Which one?
Nowatzki.
Oh, Nowatzki's not coming back to the planning commission. You guys approved.
He's done?
Yeah, you approved it, so he's just in detailed
okay.
engineering right now.
Okay.
I
I
just
thought
wanna-
we were at site plan for him.
No, you guys approved
Okay.
you guys approved the site plan with conditions.
Okay, I'm
And,
sorry, I must have forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me back up.
Uh,
He does have to come back to the planning commission, I'm sorry. We've been stuck in the staff review for so long that I had assumed you guys I've reviewed this thing like 4 times. So you're right, he will be coming back to the planning commission.
Okay.
Probably not within the next 2 weeks, though.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
We have no public hearings, so we're going to move on to old business. You see in your packet, I did a second draft here of the annual report to the Board of Trustees, and I hope this one meets with your approval. I did remove a lot of the language that was there was concerns about. Mr. Stanalajczo.
I want to make the motion to approve the annual report to the Board of Trustees as presented.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Stanalajczo and support by Mr. Iaquinto to adopt it as it's written, to pass on to the Board of Trustees. Any more discussion on it? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the priorities from the ranking exercise. I hope this was self-explanatory when you saw the numbers. The smaller the number, the better, the higher it ranked. So, and I provided all of the originals to you, but I didn't print them out tonight. So here we have, it appears that our review of the master plan is our top-ranked item. to work on, and then you see the different portions of it underneath one that we'll be talking about in relation to the master plan. Is there any, does anyone have any comments about this? No? No concerns about it? Okay, and you, yeah, go ahead.
Is it dog hoarding
Dog hoarding.
or dog boarding?
No, it's more of a hoarding issue.
So like multiple dogs, I mean, too
like-
many dogs? and-
Yeah, like lots of dogs in, on small lots in neighborhoods that are kind of problematic. So there's no like set number. Like we might say you can have 4 chickens, but and I don't think we have a chicken ordinance, but we don't have anything that says how many dogs you can have or how many, in your house or whatever. And that was an issue apparently, at least a year ago. So that's why it's on the list. But
So in certain
Mr.
areas, we did limit like 3 animals of any kind. That would include dogs, wouldn't it?
that was ag,
In
wasn't
the
it?
ag,
where we-
yeah. Is that what you're talking about, in the ag area?
No,
You're
and I
talking
don't
about
think
throughout
dogs.
the township?
No, this was in like neighborhoods or something.
Oh,
The
okay.
dog hoarding thing was, I don't think dogs are included, that's farm, those are farm animals. We had some new rules about that. Okay. Yeah, I don't think, okay. So anyway, my thought with this ranking is we would just start working on this as we can at our meetings and kind of making progress through, reviewing these things, taking into account what Mr. Lewan is going to present to us shortly about the master plan issues also. So if everyone's fine with this, I'll just put this on our schedule and we'll start working our way through it. Is everybody fine? Okay, great. And then we'll move on then, if there's no more discussion on our rankings, to the master plan update and revision issues. And you have a memo from Mr. Lewan and then his suggestions. So let's go ahead and talk about that, Mr. Lewan.
Thanks. The memo that, I did give you a memo and kind of some list of some tasks and some main issues that, I see have developed over the months. And I kind of went at this as a way to kind of move forward on this whole project. I think I've outlined a few things that we have to address to move forward. And then maybe some procedures that we could use, depending on which way you guys want to go here. So if you look at the document that's titled Northfield Township Master Plan Update and Revision Issues and Steps to Conclusion, I've identified 2 main issues here that I think we've got to address. The first is really the full revision of the master plan. The second is a more limited revision of the master plan based upon the previous request from Biltmore Properties. So if you'll see, I go through some discussion and a little history of what's gone on to date. Of course, the big picture issue that has really resulted from discussions from the township board and the master plan, and it's a much longer, a much broader discussion, is the revision and looking at the entire master plan. So that's out there. That's kind of the big picture issue. The second issue is more limited, and that's in relationship to the request that was previously brought forth to the Planning Commission with regard to the southwest area of the township and the central sub-area that's currently in the town, that's the current area identified in the master plan. A little history, and talked about this before. We talked about it last meeting. This began last summer. And this was really after a joint meeting of the township board and the planning commission about, first question back then was, do we even want to go forward with this kind of project? re-looking at this part of the township, and pretty much unanimously the answer seemed to be yes, and no one certainly said don't do that. And so right away we sent out a notice of intent to plan, which is a required step when you begin to review your master plan. You're supposed to alert the neighboring communities that you're doing that. So that notice went out, and that notice is still valid, by the way. There's no expiration to a notice of intent to plan, so that's still out there, and that's fine. We've provided the required notification. At the meeting I think we had in July, I provided quite a bit of information, which I do have some of those slides which we might want to talk about later, but provided a few possible alternatives just for discussion purposes of the Planning Commission, knowing that we had a ways to go, but I wanted the Planning Commission to see what a few alternatives might look like in the area in question. We also talked about a study area. I proposed 2, but you really indicated that the boundaries I provided in the study area could have been changed. The Planning Commission at that point chose a tighter study area, which did include properties outside of the properties that were brought forth for a requested change, a little further north and slightly further west. So that's where the Planning Commission left off with the studying the plan and the study area. At the same meeting, the Planning Commission made a motion to request some additional studies from the Biltmore folks as they requested this to begin with. Those studies were a traffic study, a cost of service study, and a sewer study. As we mentioned last time, the sewer study is underway. I have no details on the other 2, but it seems like the waiting for all 3 of these has been perhaps confusing to maybe why we have or haven't pushed on with this effort. However, they were requested, and so I've listed, as you see in the left-hand side of the paper, kind of our first task. I think that the Planning Commission has to come to grips with here is what do we want to do with these studies? Do we want to wait for them? We have to come to some resolution to those studies, and I'm suggesting that we address that tonight, or if you need time to think about it or talk about it, maybe at our second meeting in March. We continue to believe there's value to at least some or parts of these studies, and perhaps we can talk about that when I'm done here. But I think that because that motion is on the table and there's a request, I don't think we can ignore that request. And we have to either address it, accept them, or change what we requested. So I think that's our first task. So the second task, if we decide to move on, either with or without those studies, it's sort of irrelevant for task 2, and that is to begin a process of garnering some opinion from the residents of the township that might be of a nature that we might be able to get a wide swath of public input, rather than although we very much appreciate the people who come to our meetings and the people who write us letters, it would be very helpful to have perhaps a scientific survey of the township done that would provide a representative sample within the community. That would be one option. I've provided 3 options. There are others. These are just for your consideration and really for purposes of discussion tonight. The second is a online tool that our office uses very effectively and for public input. It's a sort of an online virtual visioning session. So it's a digital visioning session. It does the same. In fact, it operates almost identical to a in-person visioning session. It allows people to, at their when they can. So has a lot of advantages over a traditional visioning session like we had when we did the master plan previously, in that we always know that everyone can't get to a traditional visioning session on the night that you have it. So having this online tool allows people to make comments about various topics. And the real interesting thing about My Community Remarks is that they can place comments on a map of the township. They can provide photographs. They can provide a wide variety of information on this, and it's very useful for public input. Not as scientific as a public opinion survey, because again, it's only the people that happen to visit the website. However, it's very similar to a traditional visioning session, where it's the people who show up at a visioning session that also are able to provide comment, and isn't necessarily a broad cross-section of the community. The third item I brought up is kind of a traditional visioning session that would be open to the public. That's what we did. We had 2 of those at the last master plan meeting, or last master plan update. They were actually very well attended, and I think we got some really good input on those visioning sessions. But that would be another option, and these aren't mutually exclusive, by the way. I mean, you could do 1 or 2 or all 3 if you wanted, So, but I think because of my opinion, and kind of observing what's happened over the ensuing months since this first came up, and seeing the letters from the folks who believe that growth would be beneficial to the community, and the folks that believe they don't want to see growth in the community, I understand both points of view. However, getting a kind of a systematic way of allowing that opinion to occur, other than people, and again, we appreciate people coming to the meeting, but other than just people coming to the meeting, I think would be helpful, and is an approach that I would recommend for any master planning effort that would come up in any community, and is something that we do, we do in all the master plans we work on. So I would suggest if we do want to proceed with a public input part to this study, we could do that through the month of April, and have a summary of that information completed in May sometime, either the first or second, probably the second meeting in May. Yep.
Now, the issue number 1 and issue number 2, you're talking about a full revision of the master plan during this, is that correct? Or are they the same steps?
Issue number 1 is would be a full-blown master plan revision.
Now, what's the difference between that and an amendment to the current master plan? What's the process difference?
The process is identical, except for the except for the time that the neighboring communities have to comment on the plan. So for a full-blown amendment to the master plan, it's a 63-day comment period, so about 2 months. For an amendment or a sub-area master plan, like we did with the territorial Whitmore Lake sub-area, it's only like I think it's a 42-day period. It's a little over a month. So you just shave a month. That's really the only difference.
And how about the cost differential?
The cost differential would be substantial. A full-blown master plan change, you're talking, I mean, really start to finish, although we probably don't have to do start to finish, but if you were, you're talking $15,000 to $20,000 probably. An amendment to the master plan, for a certain sub-area shouldn't be much more than $4,000 or $5,000. So, I mean, and those are, don't quote me on those numbers, but if you want an idea, that's, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Howard says they're both pretty low, that they could both be somewhat low. But there's obviously a big difference there. So just kind of moving along, so task 2, so task 1, again, is addressing the outstanding reports that the Planning Commission asked for. Task 2 is if you want to proceed with this, that we provide, get into some sort of public input. Task 3 is after that public input is done, I provide the Planning Commission with the outcome of that, of the public input, that we provide some alternatives. Those alternatives I have slated in June, some of our meetings in June. And at that point, the plan, this would be under issue 2, by the way. This would be more of a sub-area revision. The sub-area revision would be sent to the Board of Trustees for distribution. And what that means is it then gets distributed to the surrounding communities for their 42 or 43, I just looked the exact number, day comment period. And then after that comment period, we would hold a public hearing. And by the way, these are all steps required by state law when you amend a master plan. Didn't used to be this difficult, but now it's much more complicated. And then at that point, the Planning Commission has to hold a public hearing. I'm estimating approximately August, September, when that could occur for any sub-area change, and not giving any, I'm not guessing or predicting what that sub-area change might be, if anything, at this point. So there'd be a lot of work to do to find out what exactly would occur at that point. And then the next task 4 is really depending on how this conversation might go this evening and maybe in ensuing meetings, is to look at the entire master plan. So to look at a full master plan amendment. The master plan as it sits will be required to be looked at least in 2017. And it certainly wouldn't be odd for a community to begin looking at their plan a year out before it, of it being being expired. And so, this fall would not be out of the question to start looking at some amendments or changes to a master plan, an amendment to a plan. So, I mean, I in listening to the discussion that's occurred I thought I just want to put this out as some tasks we could start to address, and of course this could be altered by our discussion tonight, but really kind of get us to talking about an actual process to start moving this thing forward. So that was really my intention tonight, is to kind of get something on paper to get us thinking about moving this forward.
Okay.
And I'll certainly listen at this point and take notes and
Okay. Does anyone have
try to answer any questions.
questions or comments that they'd like to make on this process? Mr. Iaquinto?
Thank you. Good synopsis, Doug. I appreciate that greatly. It kind of clears a good vision for us of what's ahead of us. I have been on the Planning Commission for 2 master plan revisions in the past, and I don't ever remember I know for a fact we didn't require a third party to produce any type of studies. And I do understand that Biltmore came to the township and asked us to take a look at a master plan amendment or a rezoning, were their words, I believe, either or. I don't believe I voted, I may have, I don't remember, but I am definitely not in favor of requiring a third party, especially at this time, to produce studies for us for the master plan amendment or a total revision. And again, that's my opinion. I am in full favor of supporting or making a motion to withdraw those requirements if that's the consensus of the board.
Ms. Chick?
I have a question for Doug. The studies that we requested from Biltmore, there was a fiscal impact study, traffic study, and the sewer study, right? So our sewer study is underway. We're going to have that information pretty soon anyway. The traffic study, was that a traffic impact study, or was this a full-blown traffic study? Did we give them parameters as to what we really wanted to look at as, what's the effect on the roads locally as opposed to, or do we have to put up lights, do we have to widen roads, that kind of thing? What is the scope of the traffic study?
When we first made the motion, I provided Mr. Stolman with 3 traffic consultants that were acceptable to the Washtenaw County Road Commission. And my understanding is once he selected a consultant, we were going to work with them on what the parameters were. We never gave them any specific parameters. But the idea would be that it would provide traffic impacts to the Whitmore Lake Road and the interchanges in and around Whitmore Lake. I mean, this will ultimately have to be reviewed by the Washtenaw County Road Commission, and that's why I specifically, after the meeting we made that motion, I called some of the guys over at the county who I know and just said, hey, working in Northfield Township, we've got a project. Who would you recommend? And they gave me 3 traffic consultants, and we never got to step B.
Does the Washtenaw County Road Commission, do they provide numbers on what they feel those roads can handle at a capacity?
I don't think you're going to see maximum capacity numbers from the Washtenaw County Road Commission. I think they're reluctant to give that sort of information because then it looks as though their roads can't handle increased traffic. I've been looking for information, that kind of information for years on gravel roads, and they're very reluctant to give that kind of information.
Really? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Oh,
I'm
did you
sorry.
have more questions, Janet?
No, go ahead.
I just had some follow-up questions from Janet's questions. It's sort of striking some thought.
Go ahead.
Does the Washtenaw County Road Commission provide level of service analysis? Does the Washtenaw County Road Commission provide level of service analysis on their various roads?
I believe they have that information, yes.
Do they give it?
I have not asked them for it. I don't know.
Well, they're
I'm
a
guessing
public-
when the Nowatzki project came in, they knew what the level of service was at Whitmore and Territorial, so they must have that information. They knew what the existing level of service was. I don't, but I've never asked. I've never seen that kind of comprehensive data.
When you refer to the level of service, is that the existing count that goes and utilizes the road?
No.
Okay.
No. Level of service analysis is a measure from A to F. Is that right? A to F.
Yeah.
And it is an analysis on how the road is functioning from a capacity perspective. So you may have a level of service A on US 23 that has millions of cars that use it, and a level of service F on a dirt road. So it's not the traffic counts per se, but the how well the road is functioning. And level of service analysis change from time period. So you may have a level of service A at one time of the day and a level of service F at a different time of the day.
Yeah, and they'll be very interested, as Howard mentioned, in like peak times of the day. We'll have the worst levels of service, obviously.
Ms. Chick?
So I just did want to make a comment. I did some looking online. I noticed in the minutes there was a comment at our last meeting that it was stated that traffic studies is irrelevant for a master plan amendment. Actually, it is not. It's not typical, but it's not atypical. If you look around, you can find instances in other communities. So it's not, I'd say it's not, doesn't happen all the time, but it's not that it never happens either. So it can be requested. I do have a question about the fiscal impact study as well. Are we trying to look at cost of services for any kind of development in that area? Is that our only goal for looking at that? Or what is, I guess, the parameters of that as well?
That request came out of some notes that I took at the joint meeting of the Planning Commission and Township Board, and it was I forget which board member it was, but one of the board members was curious about the impacts of, both either positive or negative that a project like that would have on the township.
So we're looking at like fire and
Yeah.
police and that kind of thing.
Tax
So, okay.
implications.
Because I'm thinking any developer that is really interested in putting into development is going to kind of, you know, expand the benefit to the community as opposed to what it's actually going to cost the township to have that
Yep.
in there.
I don't disagree, and that would be the hardest study to get meaningful results out of. It would be the cost of service study, because it's a study that if you simply looked at the tax implications for a home on the municipality, then single-family residential is a tax loser. But if you look at other things, like what would happen if 100 homes were built, what kind of development does that spur, then it could end up being a net tax winner. And so it kind of depends on how the study is done. And so of the 3 studies we requested, I would agree that probably has the least, perhaps the least value of what we'd be asking for.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Mr. Stanalajczo?
Well, as I alluded to at our last meeting, during the discussion, is that I do believe, and I sent this out in some communications this past week, and I wasn't on the Planning Commission when all this took place, but I think actually it was wrong for the Planning Commission to actually look into adjusting our master plan based upon the request of a developer. I think what's happened is that this request from this developer has actually pointed out that there are problems with our master plan that need to be addressed. But I think trying to tailor our master plan amendment to a specific developer, I think is wrong. And I don't think it should be done. So then that goes along with my opinion with Mr. Iaquinto, is that asking a specific developer because they want to put in a development in a particular area for these studies, to me, doesn't make sense. That developer shouldn't be tied to us looking for the future of our township for this land use and master plan possible amendment. But I said I'm not in favor of the studies to move along with this. I would think that just like anybody else, that if they want to actually put the development in and bring in a site plan for us to consider, then that's when you put those conditions upon them. And that's what I think is the appropriate measure to have happen. But basically sit around and wait for our master plan to move forward based upon the developer to give us these studies on something that may never happen, I don't think is smart.
Any more questions? Okay, I have a couple comments. When Mr. Stolman showed up with his map of all of the properties that he assembled, he was hoping to get 1,500 homes. 1,500 homes represents 15,000 vehicle trips. Now, I know he would, if he got all 1,500 homes, and it would be built out over 5 years, 10 years maybe. But 15,000 trips associated with those homes on Whitmore Lake Road would be a substantial burden to Whitmore Lake Road at this point. So if he had walked in and asked for 200 homes, I don't think we'd be talking about this right now. But 1,500 homes was a lot. And so I think a traffic study was an appropriate thing for us to consider if we were going to consider an amendment to the master plan. If we believed development was appropriate down there on below our industrial area on Whitmore Lake Road. So I don't have a problem with requesting that. And we asked him to do it because we didn't want the Board of Trustees to have to put any money into a traffic study or any expenditure basically into this request to have some residential done. So that's why the traffic study was requested of the developer. And it's not out of line necessarily to need to know what kind of traffic is going to be generated. I believe, Mr. Lewan, you mentioned some time ago that Scioto Township had done a traffic study in their Zeeb Road area. but that wasn't done as part of that was done for their master plan.
Yeah, that was just as an example, I know there's been some comment about not requesting a study because there's no plan. And we did a very detailed traffic impact study with OHM a few years ago at the I-94 Z Road interchange. Actually, the township, in that case, the township DDA commissioned the study to determine how the interchange would have to be upgraded so that it wouldn't impede future growth within the area. They didn't want it to become so congested that people would not want to have any part of that part of the township. And so we did what I assumed would happen in this case, and that was to place some estimated values for density in the various locations. It's a relatively easy process at that point to come up with total number of homes, and then you can apply those total number of homes to trips per day, and then go from there. And so it's not certainly not something that can't be done, and something that, from my recollection, wasn't even that difficult to do for us to get those studies. And then, of course, in our case, as was my thought with Mr. Stolman, is we gave, in the case in SIO, we had a range of densities. We had a range of commercial densities, office densities, residential densities, and looked at several different scenarios, which I assumed would happen in this case as well. So, sure, that, particularly with the traffic study, and I can show, if anyone's interested, I could get a copy of the report, and it's a very detailed traffic impact study, and it's all done with, based on the current master plan of that community.
Okay. I'm not finished yet. And the reason we chose that smaller area to look at in the southwest corner was because there was the potential for development, more dense development than ag, because it was a paved road. It was I don't know if it's called a minor, what's it called, a minor arterial, Whitmore Lake Road? Yeah. Anyway, it's a pretty good road as far as being able to handle traffic. And so then we considered that perhaps there could be more development along that road than further in on all of the dirt roads toward Hellner and Maple. So that was my thought when we chose that smaller area, and I thought it would be more appropriate to consider it along that whole area. Yes, it included most of the properties that Biltmore had assembled, but I thought it was appropriate to do it that way. So while I'm not bent on the fiscal impact study, because I believe I mean, it's a chicken and egg thing. You have houses, then you get commercial, then you have, the balance there would end up being to the advantage of the township eventually, but the houses, yes, would come first. So I agree that that's not as important. I do believe the traffic study is important, though, and so I really would like to see that. And then the sewer study, I think, is critical. Mr. Fink.
Mr. Iaquinto.
Oh, Mr.
First, please.
Iaquinto.
Thank you. I remember Biltmore coming in and mentioning that they wanted to discuss with us what type of development we would like to see. I don't remember a mention of 1,500 homes. I could be wrong, but I would ask you, Mr. Fink, because I know you had a lot of the earlier contact.
Sure. It was in the document. There is a mention of 1,500 homes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, that's fine, because I don't remember that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I don't know if it was stated, but I believe it's in the documentation of the actual amendment.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question? I've typically been very quiet at the Planning Commission, but I think I'd like to try to help as much as I can. I think Janet is correct in that traffic impact analysis for master plans, while they're not unheard of, they're a bit out of the ordinary. And I'm not sure if that's what you said, so if I phrased it wrong, please speak up. It's not inappropriate, but they're a bit out of the ordinary. And one of the reasons why I think you guys are struggling with this traffic study is if you decide to move forward with the traffic study, which I have my own opinion on, and I'll keep that to myself, what is your goal? What are the parameters of the study? What are you trying to answer? Traffic studies are like anything else. They're documents that can go from one end of the spectrum to another end of the spectrum. So what's the question you're trying to answer? In the case of the interchange at Scioto Township, that's a different analysis. These are local roads. And so I think you can answer some questions. But one, what questions are you trying to answer? And that should be the focus of the conversation. And two, what are you going to do with the information? And so instead of arguing over whether or not you need a traffic analysis, argue over the details. Because what Marlene is saying, and what I heard Marlene speak of, is she doesn't want traffic impacts on a dirt road.
No, that wasn't, we don't want to, you're talking about my smaller choice of
Right.
the study area?
Right.
No, the reason I chose that was because there was the paved road there which could handle the more traffic. And it made sense to consider a higher density there on a paved road as opposed to a dirt road which couldn't necessarily.
The problem with and I understand, if you don't mind, I'm going to give some feedback, maybe for the first time in many, many months, because I want to help move the process however you decide. And that's not my role. My role is not to provide you one way or another, is to help you. If that is the process, if that's what you're looking at, in order for you to determine that, you need to know where the outlets are from the development. So you're not going to be able to answer that question. That you have to ask yourself, what questions do you want to answer? And then determine whether or not the study is necessary. Because if you're saying we would like the smaller level study because because Whitmore Lake Road may be able to handle additional traffic and the dirt roads may not be able to handle additional traffic, you're not going to get at that analysis from what you're asking, because you don't know how the traffic patterns are going to look. From what I can see about the stuff that you can analyze is your level of service of these roads. So I would encourage you all to ask the question, what do we want to know from the traffic analysis? And then I think Doug can take that information, if you decide you want to do a traffic analysis, which I'm not saying that you should or you shouldn't do, but then Doug can take that information and say, can we answer those questions for you? Because right now, we're arguing in conceptuals.
We do have a great deal of problem with that North Territorial US 23 interchange. People getting over the bridge, people getting off of the expressway. I'm just wondering, and maybe this traffic study will come back and say, nothing to worry about, the F level is just fine at the corner of Whitmore Lake and North Territorial for several hours of a day. But what's going to happen when those people come home from work, they're getting off of the expressway, either coming north or south, and they're backed up onto the expressway? That's what I'm envisioning maybe that's not the case.
So that's a really good question, because it goes back to, what are you going to do with the information? So let's say you get that analysis, and that analysis comes back. Is that going to change your thinking?
Maybe it's a
Beca-
phasing issue.
Well, but there is there's only one interchange that I know of right now that's being built in Michigan. There's no money in the system. There are interchanges all throughout Ann Arbor that require vast improvements. The interchange at Barton Road
Terrible.
requires vast improvements. And so let's say you get that information. You find out that, and I'm not sure that the level of traffic analysis that you're asking for, the level of specificity that you have, I don't think you're going to be able to get to model to the interchange. I don't think you're going to be able to model that to the interchange. I think the best you're going to be able to do is model that to the local roads in some very limited way. I mean, at the end of the day, the information you're going to get back is limited to begin with. Not irrelevant, but limited. So let's say you get information back that shows that you might have some traffic impacts at North Territorial. That might be a good question to ponder. Is that going to change your analysis? Is that the question you want to answer? Because, I mean, we have to start, and I'm posing these questions to you all. I'm not trying to lead you in one way or another. We have to start talking about the specifics of what you want to know about.
I'm interested in the kind of backups we're going to have on North Territorial and Whitmore Lake Road. But
Are you going
is
to
that
analyze
valid?
that based on? Are you going to analyze that based on the 2017 construction that is proposed at North Territorial? Or are you going to analyze that based on what's currently there? What's currently there right now at North Territorial, in peak hours, is probably a level of, it's probably a low level of service. I mean, let's.
Okay. Mr. Stanalajczo.
Well, one of the things that you're asking for, let's say that Biltmore even starts this and they get all the way through and everything gets approved. You're talking about 5, 10, 15 years out before you ever end up hitting that. So the relevance of a traffic study right now of something that might be projected out 15 years, what's the relevance of that?
Right.
And I do know, somebody told me that there is a current traffic study on Whitmore Lake Road already that's been done, which is, and I think within the past 5 years, the Road Commission did a study of it already. And I don't know if you know about that, Howard, but.
I don't. But that would be good information to have.
So, isn't Nowatzki, didn't they just end up doing a traffic study?
Right, they did
So,
one.
I'm not sure, since Biltmore can walk away right now, they have not put a shovel in the ground, and they have nothing before us.
Right.
To say that they need to supply us with something that is a conceptual process or something that might happen down the road, and when they aren't even committed to anything, that's what I think is wrong in the process. The reason the criticism about talking about amending our master plan based upon that one particular area, because it does look like we are changing our master plan for a developer, because it includes just that area. So that criticism is actually, I think, well-directed, because we should never end up doing that. But my point about trying to tie a particular developer to a study when they haven't committed to anything, I think is premature.
Do you have any comments to add, Mr. Lewan?
No, I mean, good questions. I think the traffic study would in fact get up to North Territorial and Whitmore Lake without a whole lot of trouble. And you would likely get it down as far south as you wanted to go. I mean, you could, there's really not a whole lot of other places traffic can go. And the study we did for SIO wasn't very different than this. It really had to do with the interchange of 94 and Zeeb Road. This has to do primarily with the interchange of Whitmore Lake and Territorial in 23. So, I mean, it certainly could be done. Knowing the parameters is a, we never got to that part. I can only say that. I mean, we would have worked out this stuff over since July if the developer would have taken the next step here.
Right.
And so, in any event,
Right. So we have no study at this point, so.
Here's
Go
one
ahead.
thing I would suggest. If we want to have a traffic study for doing something like this, isn't that something then that the township should commit to asking for? If we're asking for this from the planning commission, for something that we're looking at is a review of our processes, and we think it's important, isn't that something that we should undertake?
Mr. Kuzno, you had a comment?
The comment that we're kind of bending toward a particular developer's request, that is the only reason why we're looking at this place in
Right.
this area in the first
Exactly.
place.
What
We would
did I
not,
miss?
this was totally off the
Yeah.
radar screen for us
Yeah.
until somebody came along and said, hey, by the way, that's Ann Arbor Schools over there, and I want to build my homes over there, and I've assembled this property. Therefore, that's the only reason why we're even looking at this thing in the first place.
Right.
And it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that there's going to be tremendous impact at both North Territorial and Barton. You said it yourself, Barton's a terrible intersection, and guess what? It's going to get more impact, no doubt about it. Those people are going to come up that way, more than likely. I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I do take those routes quite a bit, and that I think the reason we're even considering it, or why we'd throw it out there, is it is kind of an acquiescence to the public that we want to know what the citizens in that area, how they're going to be impacted by a tremendously large development that wasn't anticipated in the previous master plan. Right?
Right. Exactly. Ms. Chick?
I'm glad Mr. Kuzno brought that up, because I was getting a little confused and thought I'd missed something, because that is how developers, they can do two things. They can ask for a master plan amendment, or they can ask for a rezoning. If they're asking for a master plan amendment, then that's why we look at that area. It's not wrong to make decisions based on a developer asking for a master plan amendment. That's the process. I think we widened it a little bit, because then we wanted to say, okay, let's look around and see if we can make changes there too, if we want them, if they're needed, if the public wants them. So I don't understand why it would be wrong, so I'm glad you brought that up.
But just them asking doesn't mean we're going to say, sure, we agree. I mean, our job is to look at it objectively, which is what we're intending to do. Mr. Roman, you had a comment?
I kind of agree with the consensus about requiring a study before you even know what's going in there. But like Janet said, did I miss something? And I think we are really missing something, because there's proposed work for US 23 North Territorial. Obviously, the state knows what they're going to do at this point. Am I correct?
Well, yes.
They're ready
I'll
to
respond later. Go ahead.
Okay, so obviously somebody at the county must have had some input with those improvements to the interstate. So why, and Nowatzki just did a study. We're not seeing any information at all. I kind of agree. We're kind of in the dark right now with the traffic. There's going to be an improvement at that intersection. The county must know and has something in mind or prepared to deal with that, but yet the township really doesn't know anything about it. So based on that idea alone, not whether it's right or wrong, I think there's some information that should be forthcoming.
Mr. Stanalajczo?
My question was that, do you require somebody that's a third party to provide you that information when they have no commitment here?
I said I agree with that idea.
I mean, if the township wants to do it, wants that information, if we want that information, let's do it, and...
I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
I just commented about that.
So, my criticism of looking at our master plan and amending it based upon a developer coming in is that the master plan is the community, our community, and the vision of the people that live here. A developer can come in and ask for anything. They can come in and ask for rezoning. They can ask us in order to do master plan, whatever. It's our role as the stewards for the township to look to see is that what our vision of the people that live here is. And my criticism was that it was talked about and then said, okay, well, let's go ahead and do this, this study area for this master plan amendment. As I said, that I believe that if anything, it should have been brought out that perhaps the information that they brought forward showed that there was some problems with our master plan, how it looked forward, and then our action should be based upon not them in particular, but them bringing up information showing that there are some issues that we need to address. So rather than it being tailored towards them, it's really more so, does their request cause us to look at our master plan and say, yes, our master plan has some flaws in it that we need to correct? That's where my criticism was.
Mr. Kuzno.
Okay, so one of the only reasons why they're even considering that piece of property down there is because of the sewer extension for the SAD that's going down Whitmore Lake Road. If that was not even on the table, which I have no idea what's the status of that.
That's,
I mean, we spent a long time looking at that, and there's, properties, they requested it, they set up a special assessment district, and we have no idea what's happening there. So sewer's not even there, first of all. And the reason that's the only reason why, so that guy, he sees this happening he says, oh, this is great, maybe I'll tag on. So we had sewer designed for a special assessment district area, and then this guy comes along and literally, more than likely, quadruples the size of that sewer that's required to make that thing work, and we don't even know what the deal is on that. You're shaking your head. I mean, we don't know. We don't have the answers, Howard. We don't know what's going on here. We need to have some information to figure out what we're doing, too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly the sewer extension provided an incentive, if you will, to make the call, to understand what the sewer capacity in the area was. There's no question that sewer extension project generated some conversation amongst commercial brokers. Early on in this project, we did look at, very, very early on, incredibly in a preliminary way, we did look at what would happen if homes were built in that area and how would they hook up to the system. And it's actually not clear whether or not the hookup would be through the existing Whitmore Lake SAD or if it would be at a different location. So that's sort of an independent analysis that hasn't even been addressed yet. It's very likely that the development, and in many ways it's less likely that the development hooks up to the Whitmore Lake SAD trunk line as it goes south, and instead actually goes directly to one of the main lines that tees off in North Territorial or on the right-of-way of US 23 or at other locations. Because of the timing of the Whitmore Lake SAD, and we don't know what the timing of the Whitmore Lake SAD is, and we don't know what the timing of the Biltmore plan is as well. We don't know if either of those projects are going to go through, frankly. They really have to operate independently of each other. And so the reason why I shook my head is I do not think you should think of building homes in the southern area of the township contingent on that Whitmore Lake SAD going through, because it's not the case.
Can I comment to that?
Go ahead.
I mean, our master plan is, the densities that are proposed in the master plan do center around where sewer exists and is planned, correct?
Yes.
So the reason that area was left as agricultural up to this point is because no sewer was anticipated and no sewer exists down there. True?
True.
Correct.
So I mean,
well, I wasn't here then, so
it's
that's
just
a
a fact.
reasonable
right,
explanation.
so,
Yeah.
and so that's why higher density is generally located near sewers and lower densities further away from the sewers. And,
Sure.
So, I mean, it's not like we were derelict in our duties here, and I don't think that we were derelict in requesting information from somebody that's asking for something that, hey, would he have come along and proposed this project in that area if that sewer SAD was not being proposed? That's the real question. And whether you think they're going to hook up to it or not, they probably would, that's what tipped them to thinking that they could do it anyway.
I would agree that that's right. That's what I thought, that's what I was trying to
Yeah,
articulate.
I get that, but again.
But when you look at the actual numbers on a very back-of-the-envelope type of analysis, there isn't much difference between hooking up to the Whitmore Lake SAD and having to change the infrastructure that's going into the Whitmore Lake SAD, right? Because SADs are designed only for the properties that are in the SAD. So if he would have to hook up, if he, for example, were to hook up to the Whitmore Lake SAD, which I don't think ultimately would happen, but let's say that did occur, he would have to, there would have to be different infrastructure that was put in. That cost of that different infrastructure, it turned out, was very similar to, at least from a back-of-the-envelope perspective, the cost of just going to the main line,
So they've analyzed that already, you're saying?
in a very, very rudimentary way.
Okay.
But my point is this: you are correct in that that Whitmore Lake SAD probably did create
Yeah,
the
momentum.
The what?
Momentum.
The momentum, yes.
I get it.
But ultimately, is the development contingent on the Whitmore Lake SAD? No.
Okay.
Are
I
you
said
done?
one, just,
Yeah.
do we know how many homes there are in our township right now? Do we, I mean, I have no idea what the number is.
There is roughly 3,500, if I had to guess, Doug's looking it up for me, let's see how close I get. Roughly 3,500 dwelling
So we're
units.
talking a 50% increase in one area, basically. That would be maximum, and that would be,
That'd be
I think it'd be
maximum.
foolish, but that would be possible according to what he's asking for, right? I mean, that'd be a lot.
It's huge. Yeah.
We need,
Mr. Roman?
Okay, thank you. I agree with 100% with what Brad is speaking of. But, you know, you said, is it contingent? No, it's not contingent, but it definitely makes a difference in your density, what you want to plan, which is exactly why we're looking at it. So without that information, or even an inkling of the information, it greatly alters what we're ultimately trying to do. And that's what I spoke of last week.
Right.
And no, it's not contingent, hooking up to the Whitmore Lake. We don't even know if they can, we don't know. But alternatives, and that's going to affect density, it's interrelated, so that's my point. I think
It is.
that study is ultimately a big player with what you want to look at.
I'll go back to Mr. Iaquinto.
we need to keep in mind as well, too, that per Washtenaw County requirements, you could put a septic field into an acre parcel. So, you know, we need to keep that in our mind factor as well, because, again, if, even if there were no sewers in that area, and we looked at even a denser capacity without requiring sewers, or without requiring them to come in and put their own sewer system in, that they would have to maintain and run, you know, we could look at what the county specs are, which is an acre parcel for septic field. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay,
Madam
Our
Chair.
zoning's not 1 acre.
It's not,
Right.
no,
Right.
but I just want to mention that to keep that in mind, because, again, that is an important factor when you look at what is
And-
available
and you have to have
sewer-wise.
soils to support it.
Yes, I'm agreeing with all that. I'm agreeing with all that.
Janet hasn't talked.
I'm sorry, real quickly, in relation to the septic, we don't even know if that property perks over there, that land perks over there, and we'd have to have some kind of study to determine that, and that would determine density, right?
Well, we wouldn't.
No, we wouldn't, I'm
No.
saying, yeah, we would have to see something, though.
Well, the developer would do that, you know. Mr. Stanalajczo.
I know we're sort of arguing about semantics here, but, I mean, our job as the master plan is to look at a 20-year placement on where it is we believe that certain densities are going to be allowed or not allowed. And that is part of our job, is to take these things all into consideration, so that perhaps us looking at this, even if we decided to, in that area, that it needs to be changed into a different density, that doesn't mean that that this developer is going to be able to put 1,500 homes based upon what we feel that is going to be allowed. So my point about whatever the developer wants, to me, is irrelevant. It's really more so all of these things that we're talking about need to be, taken into consideration. And we need to visualize what our community is going to look like 20 years from now, and where it is that they're going to have some higher densities than what perhaps we're allowing right now for future land use, taking into consideration all those things. Sewers, I mean, who knows what sewer extensions are going to be 20 years from now. But we still have to have a vision where it is we believe that natural growth is going to take place to allow some higher densities in areas that perhaps right now it's not. Like I said, I'm not saying that they're going to allow anything that we look at. It needs to be defensible. So if we zone a particular area or look in our master plan and say this is the density that we're looking for, a developer comes in and said, I want double that, and there's no place else in our community that allows that to take place, I think it ends up making it a less defensible document. Because then they're going to go to court and say they're not allowing us in order to develop our property. And then you start getting into a court issue, which we've dealt with for, a 10-year process. So I'm basically just saying we're all talking along the same lines, but again, getting away from whatever Biltmore wants, however many houses they want, to me is kind of irrelevant. We shouldn't even take that into consideration. It should be more so what we're looking at and what we want our community to look like. And they're going to have to fit into whatever it is that we decide.
Any more down here? Okay. Okay, and then Mr. Lewan has something to say. Go ahead.
Just one, this could fall under the category of, hindsight's 20/20, but, early on, there's, and, Mark wasn't here in the early stages of the review process, but, Biltmore did make a request, so that's clear. We have their documentation. And we then wanted to look at that part of the township. And so we had a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Township Board. And I kind of look at that meeting, that was the meeting in my mind that it was going to be kind of a go, no-go on reviewing that part of the master plan. And now things have evolved, and it looks like it's, as I said last time, and I mentioned in my report here, it looks like it's a bigger effort. But at the time, I provided quite a bit of information to the board and the Planning Commission at that joint meeting. And it was again, I kind of look at it as a go, no-go, and unanimously, or I didn't hear anyone say no-go from the Planning Commission or the Township Board to look at that specific part of the township as an area that might be appropriate for growth. And so really that is, and now this has been going on for quite some time, but that's my recollection of how that study area opened up. And I even mentioned almost very similar words to Mark at the time was, well, once we kind of get going on this, it's really not Biltmore anymore. We're just looking at a study area, like a sub-area of Northfield Township. However, as I said, and I outlined in my report here, we now have a bigger issue. I think this is sort of spinning into a much larger issue. But that wasn't the case at first. It was a very specific spot that the Township Board and the Planning Commission agreed to. And that was the direction we were given, and that's the direction that we started down. That's my recollection.
That's mine too. Mr. Iaquinto, you had a comment?
Yeah. From our discussions here, Doug, I mean, the task first today, you were looking at address the requested studies from Biltmore. It sounds like there's a majority of board members that want to look and keep in place the traffic impact study, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, just from listening
More
to the
information,
discussion.
yes.
Okay, but that the scope of studies study was not as,
Fiscal
scope of services study was not as pertinent at this time. I'm just kind of doing a consensus from our discussion.
The fiscal study.
Yeah.
Right. We can vote on that, but that, are you finished?
I was going to make a motion to that effect then, so that we can kind of move forward with a consensus and, because we can, and we can
But it
talk
might
about
go
this for a
further
couple more
than this.
hours,
Oh,
but.
right.
Before,
Go
before we
ahead.
make a motion, let's talk about who's going to be responsible for doing that particular study. I mean, is that something that we should end up
Or even
having the township?
define the parameters, right?
I mean, I think
As it was
it's,
stated.
well, I think it's smart just to have a study, if we're going to do it, for our own particular purposes here of looking at our master plan review, if that's something that's important. And if that's the case, how can we have Biltmore fund that? They're just a third party, and they've committed, I mean, they've asked for this, they've asked for us to look at the master plan amendment, but if this is a bit of information that we believe is important, who's the one that's going to be responsible for doing that? And that's a question that you need to think about before you make your motion.
Mr. Kuzno?
We made reference to it, when Nowatzki was in here, we had some documentation that we were looking at for that intersection and the bridge and all that stuff from both MDOT and Road Commission. Why can't we use those resources right now? Can we get someone to present us something or give us information that's available in the area that's already been done? We know that they're already, they're poking this area already. They've got to have some information. So that would be nice to be able to at least have that at our disposal to digest. And it's just,
I suspect there's a
question.
lot out there that we could just get for free, right?
yeah, that's what I'm
For
saying. So
nothing.
why, I mean, at this point, do we need to really contract somebody to get that? And it could be a
Right.
very large, study area.
Yeah. Somebody's got to gather it up, though, and Mr. Lewan could do that, correct?
Yeah, I could work with the road commission and find out what they have, if
Okay.
you wanted to do that first, before determining if an additional study is needed, I suppose.
All right. I would feel comfortable with that. Well, Ms. Chick, you were going to say something?
Are we on the traffic study? I
Yeah.
was going to go back to the fiscal study, but
Oh, okay. Well,
I was also going to ask that if, while you guys are doing this, if you could also, again, define really what you feel our goal should be and how we're going to utilize the information. Because, I mean, we all may have thoughts and ideas, but I would look at yours and Mr. Fink's expertise to give us some thought process in how to do that.
Sure.
Does the planning commission want me to be involved in that? Is that a unanimous shaking of the heads?
I personally
Well-
do.
If you have connections or relationships over there that you could tap into, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I don't want to step on any toes, and
Well,
I want to,
okay. But again, I think Mr. Lewan can do the same thing, right?
I was asking for both of them to work together.
Both of them to work together?
Yeah.
I'm good with
Because you
that.
both are,
Yeah.
have consider experience in these areas.
Okay.
Well, also, Mr. Fink's
I'm
our
good with
township
that.
representative,
Yes.
frankly, so.
Yeah. Okay, I'm good with that.
I wanted to, if I may, I wanted to address Mr. Roman's comments on the sewer. I just want to clarify some things, because you brought up some really good questions, and I want to make sure everybody is aware what information they're going to get, when they're going to get it, and what part of this process they're going to get it at, okay? The sewer capacity study that is being worked on right now is not going to address any issues related to this specific development. There are multiple factors when we talk about capacity. You have capacity of the line, so you have the capacity in terms of moving sewer from one place to another. You have capacity of the plant. You have existing agreements that we already have out there. This capacity study is simply going to tell us what we have allocated from a sewer assessment district perspective out into the community, what our existing flow is, what our dry weather and wet weather conditions are, potentially cost of equalization basins. This study is not going to tell us anything about the sewer related to Biltmore, if it should hook up to the Whitmore Lake SAD, the cost of any of that. All of that will get determined if the proposal moves forward much later on in the process when the developer starts looking at engineering. All right? So you're not going to have that information. And I don't think there's any way, I mean, we certainly would never try to get that information. We're not going to do a study for a developer. What our service study is what do we have in terms of capacity? And that's really it. And I know that you know that. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody else, because when we talk about where's the sewer going to hook up and what's it going to cost and what's the capacity of that line, that's way down the line.
Okay. Ms. Chick, you had some questions about the...
Madam Chair? Can I
sorry, Mr. Roman.
And since I've been speaking about the sewer, I have never mentioned the details. I agree with you.
Okay.
I've never mentioned any of the details pertaining to a particular site.
Right.
Right.
But in going to the joint meeting we had with the trustees, all that information that was brought up and talked about at that meeting, which I was present at, remains, I think, a good factor on determining what we need to look at here.
Agreed.
In this area.
Agreed. The only thing...
I just wanted to clarify, I've never spoken about any cost or how they're going to do what they need to do.
Right. I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that we'll get a capacity evaluation, but we won't have any information related to how to get the sewer from one place to another. So, thank you, Larry.
Okay. Mr. Kuzno.
Well, you're absolutely right, Howard, and I think that along with Larry, the capacity at the plant and whatever our trunk line to get there is immensely critical to anything that's going to happen in this area. So I was never talking about capacity of the sewers that they're going to be building or the SAD. Yeah, I would think that you'd want to study that. If you're going to put in a new sewer, and if you could tag these guys on there for 50% more cost than going all the way around it, that would be something to look at. But the capacity of the plant and our capacity to get from North Territorial to our plant, those are critical points that cannot be avoided.
They are, but what I'm trying to say is the second part is not part of the study.
Right.
Okay, all right, but they are critical. I mean, the trunk line capacity is a massive question, and the Planning Commission will have to have that information at some point.
Okay. Doug, go ahead.
Just a simple, I'm not an engineer, obviously, I don't play one on TV, but my simple view of this was always that there was capacity, right? And we had always been under the impression that capacity wasn't an issue. And so my perspective on this is that we weren't asking for size of pipes or cost. In fact, of all the studies, I thought initially that sewer was the least problematic because we were always thought that there was a lot of capacity and this should not be an issue. And so I think we kind of threw that one on there just as we need to know what's the capacity just to make sure we're not in trouble and make sure there is capacity particularly for those who are already in the district. And so again, I think we were just trying to determine, is there capacity in the system? Not a lot of detailed engineering, so I would definitely agree with what Howard said there. But on the other hand, that is a big issue, and it definitely has an impact on this project, potential project.
Right.
One quick, is it true that study that Tetra Tech is doing, that's a township commissioned, okay, it's not the developer has nothing to do with that, okay.
We're paying for it.
Okay. Ms. Chick.
Regarding the fiscal study, I think that we don't need a full-blown study. I think some of the information that we might find important actually the township can do, you know, do we need a fire department or a fire station down there if the development goes through, or, you know, that kind of thing? Or do we need more police to patrol down that way? But we can get that information. I mean, I'm sure there's other things, but I don't know that what else we would be looking for that would be pertinent to our discussion.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the sewer study. If we, say we only have 1,000 more homes, I mean, 1,000 more units or whatever that can go onto the system without this massive expansion, do we really want to put them all in one spot? So that, because we talk about, you know, infill. I mean, we got this really nice map from the supervisor, and this was not realistic, but let's fill in this area here, and it was in the sewer district, and, you know, if you want to throw 100 houses here and 100 houses here, and, you know, and then there's other places, do we really want to allow them to all be in one spot down there? And, you know, so it's a bigger question. And so knowing that number and knowing how we would want that the homes to be distributed in the township is an important thing. So I'm thinking perhaps we ought to forget about the study area and just move on to take a look at where we really want. I personally believe our master plan is a great master plan. I personally do. I went through all of those meetings. I listened to all the people, and I poured through that thing, and I sat down with people at their kitchen table, and we went through it page by page. I believe in the master plan that we have, and I know that we can get some more density up in the areas where it's more appropriate. But when I looked at the master plan down there in the beginning, and the reason it was continued to be ag was because I was looking at the environmental impacts down there, the wetlands, the woodlands. It's an agricultural area, and that's why we didn't go and put more density down there, because of that. So I'm just wondering if we take all, because I think we need to be objective, if we take all the information, the traffic, the sewer, and everything, and look at it big picture wise, I think that's what we ought to be doing, rather than necessarily focusing on this little teeny thing down there that I personally think he can get enough houses on if he wants to. Anyway, you know, he can get 2-acre parcels down there if he does a nice open space development, which is what I told him the meeting, you know, when we had that one meeting. So it's 5 acres, you could get down to 2-acre parcels. But I'm told the guy doesn't want to build houses on 2 acres. So that's his problem. So he paid too much for the land, or whatever. That's his problem. That's not our problem. I don't know. I mean, okay, that was a rant, okay, but anyway.
Marlene?
Go ahead, Mr. Stanalajczo.
I don't know if you can, as a community, tell people that if you have sewer capacity of 1,000, use your example, that you can't put in 1,000 taps on that piece of property, that we want to distribute it out throughout the whole community. I don't know if that's legal to do. I don't know. Do you know anything, Howard?
I've thought about that question. My gut says you're probably not going to get there, but, I don't know.
Well,
Mark, I'm giving you a politician's answer because I just don't know. My gut says you're probably right. You cannot get there.
Can't get there.
I'm sure you could try,
Well,
but my gut says that that's probably not.
excuse me, I'm sorry. If you look at it this way, so you've already got property that's zoned at a higher density that has sewer capacity. Sewers are developed on a sewer district. So they create a district, they say the land is appropriate for all this stuff to flow in a downward fashion to get to that sewer. So the district is already, the boundary of the sewer district is already established. And so you can't, if you've got property that's already zoned to accept it, that hasn't been developed, because for whatever reason, the economics aren't right, or the property owner's not ready to get out, so then you can take, if you have 1,000 units available at the plant, and you say, oh, I'm sorry, you've been zoned this way for 10 years and you did nothing with it, we're going to give it to this guy down here who's going to extend the sewer system onto his property. Sorry, dude, you're out of luck here. And that, I don't think it can work that way. You can't just say, aren't those properties already getting taxed for having ability to get to the sewer at this point in time too?
No, I don't agree with that either.
Okay. Agree with what?
I don't agree that, that's a policy decision. There is no right or wrong to that question.
I didn't ask the question. What's the question?
I'm sorry. Should I be?
No, go ahead. He made a statement. He didn't ask a question. He just made a statement.
So what you're saying is that you've got a bunch of capacity, and that capacity may be allocated within sewer service district areas, okay, and zoned appropriately. When you buy into a sewer service district area, you're buying into the laying of the pipe, right? That's the cost of the sewer service district, is the laying of the pipe, the infrastructure of putting the pipe in. When you talk about plant capacity, you're talking about the tap fee, all right? Those are where the two things diverge. If communities were to take a hard and fast rule to say that they would not allow any development because a potential build-out of where property is, or where property is zoned today, could happen, you wouldn't have much development going on anywhere. Now, you certainly have to have some level of balance. You can't use up all your capacity and not have any of it left. But on the flip side of that, you can't say, I'm not going to use up any capacity in the existing sewer service district areas that I've got allocated out there, because it's, because that may not you may not see development in an area for 40 years. So what you're doing is you're holding back plant capacity for something in the future that may or may not occur. And in truth, the cost of putting in that district itself is not related to the assessment. The assessment is related to putting in the infrastructure, not the plant capacity itself. And so I see your point, and it's a good question, but ultimately it comes down to a policy issue of what the Board of Trustees want to do. And I would say that that's going to be the question that they're going to have to answer when the sewer study is done. Because that's basically what the question was before we started the sewer service study, which is, you've got a plant in general that is at half capacity. You've got basically on that, and this is before the study got started, you had a plant that basically had 600,000 to 700,000 gallons worth of capacity. But then you had a lot of allocated stuff out there to the North Territorial District, to this district, to that district, to that district. And if you added all that up, the question is, are we getting at our capacity? Well, you could do that, and you could add all that up and say, we're done. We're in a moratorium for development. But the development of that, the rest of it that's been allocated but not built on, may not happen for 50 years.
Yeah, agreed. Something just came to my mind. What is remember the leapfrog discussion we had with sewer? How does that apply to something like this?
The master plan does have a sewer service expansion policy. There was never one before, and there's contained in the master plan is a sewer service expansion policy that indicates we're not supposed to leapfrog on properties.
Let's say again about the leapfrog.
We're not. It indicates we are not supposed to leapfrog properties to prevent a sewer from being extended, several miles out of the district.
Okay, so that's a question that we have to deal with here, isn't it? Or is it because that the SAD is touching this property that makes it non-leapfrog? Is that the deal?
Well, it's yes, that's something we'd have to deal with.
Okay.
Well, it's something you have to deal with. It depends on what you're looking at, and it depends on what your policy is. If you're asking the question, well, where does that sewer service line end? It
Yeah.
ends, I don't know, 500, 1,000 feet from where the next property begins that is in Biltmore's request. If you're saying, well, he may not hook up to that line anyway, he's going to have to go to a different line. I mean, all of these things are policy considerations, and they all come down to, they all come back to, you know, what's the vision?
Right.
And what is it that is, what does the elected and appointed bodies and the people want to see? Because, you know, it's a policy decision. I mean, you could say it's not leapfrogging. You could say it is leapfrogging. You could say that the 500 feet is leapfrogging.
You can't say it is, or you can't say it isn't. It either is or it isn't.
No, it doesn't work that way because we've talked about leapfrogging, and I have heard people on this board say, well, if it's one parcel, you know, if it's a small distance, then that's not leapfrogging. If it's a large distance, then it is leapfrogging. What is the level of that distance?
It's whatever the cost per acre is for them to buy it, you know, I would think. But anyway, the Board of Trustees did adopt that leapfrogging policy as far as I'm concerned. You know, I recall that. I'm just wondering, are there more desirable locations for us to have that sewer
I agree.
used
I agree with that.
than down Whitmore Lake Road beyond the, you know, Regal Recycling, you know? So that's why I would like to consider more when we get the sewer study back and the traffic study back. So where are we at with this whole thing? Because we need to move on. I would like us to request the sewer study and the traffic study as much as we can gather without costing us a lot of money, and so we will not require the developer for the traffic study currently unless we're unhappy with what we get, and drop the fiscal study. Does that make sense? Okay. So at our next meeting, the 18th, do you think we can have anything?
Yeah, we can, 18th. If whatever the county has available, we can have.
Okay,
You know, because if it's available, it's available. If it's not, it's not. And
right.
we can just have whatever they have for Whitmore Lake Road in that area. And they should, as was mentioned, there should be quite a bit. You know, Myers did a traffic study years ago, you know, on the other side of the road.
Right.
So I would think the county might have quite a bit of information.
And there's been very little development since, so
Yeah.
it should be pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
you
we
know,
can...
I'll work with Howard, and between the two of us, we should be able to find out what's out there.
Okay.
What's out there.
So do we need a motion to request that sewer study at our next meeting? Well, do you think it'll be ready in a week, Mr. Fink? The sewer study?
No.
No? Well, then it's going to be a little while then before we deal with this much more, unless we want to just move on to redoing the whole master plan and going in that route.
Well, my point about task 2 is about public input.
Yes.
And that's going to be needed regardless of if we do a whole full-blown master plan or just a sub-area master plan.
Okay?
So that was my thought of putting that as task 2.
Okay?
I like the service that you offer, is it My Community Remarks tool,
Yeah.
online tool, and
Yeah.
the visioning sessions. You said scientific study. Surveys are really expensive, aren't they?
I don't know exactly what the cost would be. I'm sure this is probably not cheap.
Could we get a quote, I mean, or something?
I didn't hear that.
Could we get a quote for a scientific one?
I would highly recommend that if you're going to do a study, that you do a scientific study.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
All right, and of all of the three, that's it. Just my opinion, because otherwise it's just going to be, it's not going to be a cross section of the community.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree that I like my community remarks, and I like visioning sessions under normal circumstances. I think unfortunately, what might happen in those cases are you're just going to get as many people on either side of this issue are going to try to stack the sides. In a survey that went out to all the households, then it's just one survey per household. And
Well, if you're going to do a survey per household, which I agree with, it's not just the responses that you get back. You cannot analyze this by just who responds to the survey, because it's still going to be the same. You're still going to end up getting who stacks, who's able to get out the support to fill out the survey. You have to have a scientific analysis done in the township to prove a representative sample, and that sample has to be analyzed. And you have to look at not only in order to do a survey of relevance, okay, and a true scientific survey of relevance, you have to prove that the respondents are random and that you have a true cross-section of analysis, which means that we're going to have to figure out how you're going to break this community up. Is it going to be geographically? Is it going to be type of homes? Is it going to be income? There's going to have to be multiple types of variables looked at in order to figure out how do you prove that you have a true representative sample of all of Northfield Township.
So why would you have to make random selections? Wouldn't you just send them to everybody?
No.
Why?
No, because if you sent them to everyone and 500 people, let's just say, let's use two subdivisions. So let's say 500 people in the manufactured home community sent in the survey, all right? And let's just take two subdivisions, and 300 people sent in the survey from another subdivision. You're only getting the opinions. And let's say everybody else represents 100 people. You're getting the opinions weighed of those two districts or those two communities. And those two communities do not represent all of Northfield Township. If you want a true scientific study, you have to prove that the various categories of individuals have been represented. And you have to identify, or at least try to identify, what those categories, who those categories are. And I don't know how you do this if you send it out to everyone, because typically when you do a scientific study, it's a random. You send it out on a random basis. So then the people that you get back in, then you tabulate the data, and then you tabulate the data based on demographics, you tabulate the data based on income, tabulate the data based on geographical location. And then you reference that data to get a true cross-section. You can't just send it out to everyone, and then whoever sends it back, that's your response.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to belabor this point.
So, yeah.
In a survey like that, who sets the parameters?
Well, that's
I'm just asking a question. It's like,
Yeah.
who typically sets
Well,
those parameters?
We would like, the township would likely hire a firm, and then they would consult with us. They'd consult with the township.
And I think they could have a conversation with the planning commission, and then I think they'd have a lot of conversations with myself and Doug. And we would try as best as we possibly could to identify different groups of people so that different groups are evenly represented
Okay.
is best as we possibly could. And then there's a random factor as to who gets the survey from that point. That's my understanding of a true scientific survey.
Okay, can we move on with the course of action here now? Okay. I'd like us to get the sewer study, and that may not happen next week, but we'll get that as soon as we can. The traffic study, we might as well deal with them at the same time, but it should be within the next month or so, right? The sewer study too, and the traffic study. Okay, so we'll ask for those two things, and then we would like to start getting the public opinion survey, so we're going to need a quote. So we're going to ask for a quote on that from...
I'll again work with Howard, and
Okay.
I'm sure we have a few contacts that we can locally that do surveys.
Okay, and then let's talk about these other two, the My Community Remarks and the Vision Session, the next meeting, setting some dates for those,
If you even want to do that.
if we
yes.
even want. Well,
Yeah.
you just want to do the scientific survey and not those other two things?
That's
Go
up to
ahead.
us to decide that, not,
Right.
not
Oh,
Mr.
exactly.
Luan. But I think if we're going to end up doing a scientific survey, I don't see the point in doing the other two, because that information is going to be skewed, or could possibly be skewed one way or another based upon who shows up. I think a scientific survey is going to give us the best information available without any bias.
As long as we ask the right questions.
Well, let's...
So we have to work on that,
Well,
yeah.
you got to, that's where it is that you hire the people so they don't
That's right.
lead questions
Right.
into
The questions are
answers.
not, yeah, that's right. The questions will be written by the consultant.
But it needs the breadth of information, so
Well,
we'll
that's
look
what
at
scientific survey, I
Well-
believe, is going to do.
we'll look at the questions before they go out, I'm sure. We'll
Put it
have the
this way,
opportunity.
if you guys want to do the survey, then at the very least, the other two can just hold for a while.
Okay,
I don't think there's any point in addressing those two at this point.
okay.
It would be interesting to see if they both get
Yeah, the other point of it is we did, we just had visioning sessions just, 2.5 years ago, and
True,
I don't know if those comments will change a whole lot.
true. But it does give input that we might not have solicited, or might not have thought about, so. Okay, so, we're back to traffic study, sewer study, and the public opinion survey. And we'll hear more about those at our next meeting. Do we need a motion for that? Or is everybody all right with it consensus-wise? Okay.
Can you repeat that, please?
We're going to request the sewer study, the traffic study as much as we can get for free from the road commission and the other ones that have gone on. And then we're going to start the process to get a scientific public opinion survey. So we're good. Okay, and then as soon as we can, that will come back before us. All right. Good enough for tonight? Mr. Stanalajczo?
Can we address the first thing about the studies requesting from Biltmore? If we're going to be getting this information, is that even something that we need to continue to have sitting out there?
Well, my thought from what I heard from the discussion, is the cost of
We're doing
service
it.
study, although Janet, I think, has maybe a different opinion, but it sounded like the cost of service study was off the table. However, the traffic information, we were going to take a first cut at that to see what's available, and if it looked like additional information was needed, then it would be up to you guys to determine if Biltmore or someone else needed to take another step. Isn't that kind of what?
That makes,
happened?
yes.
Yeah. So it could still occur, but anyway, it could still occur, but at this point, it's not.
Okay. So we are making some progress here. Okay. Shall we close out that topic and move on? All right, let's move on. Mr. Lewan has brought us a workshop presentation tonight. Hopefully this won't, I don't think this will go real long anyway, but go ahead, Mr. Lewan.
Yeah. This would be kind of interesting, and we talked about this last time.
I'm going to excuse myself. I don't feel well. I apologize. I'm going to take off. Thank you. I will watch this from the minutes, though. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That one light switch would be easy.
Okay. At one of the last meetings, we talked about, I'm going to talk about At one of the last meetings, we talked about making sure the planning commissioners all understood, and this goes along with our previous discussion, by the way, about the master plan and densities and things like that. So at our last meeting, or a few meetings ago, I brought up the point that perhaps the planning commissioners can't visualize necessarily what's permitted in our zoning ordinance and how our open space provisions work and how, various projects might occur on property. And I'll hit this stuff here. I was going to hand this out. I emailed this out to everybody a little bit beforehand, so if you don't have it, I've got copies. Okay. So, again, thought it was important to kind of go over our current zoning about what things might actually look like if they were developed. So, let's first start with, let's talk about an 80-acre parcel, because that's a pretty, 40 acres are pretty common sizes that are still out there in the township, and so 240s you get to an 80, and so that shape on the right is to scale, and that would represent an 80-acre parcel. So if you were to look at an 80-acre parcel in Northfield Township, and someone wanted to do what would be the quickest way of developing property, they could come up with approximately 13 homes. And that would be based on what's permitted in the both the Township Zoning Ordinance and not only the Township Zoning Ordinance, but the Land Division Act, which allows a certain number of splits for certain size property. So in this particular, if you go down the list of bullets there, we've got an 80-acre parcel. That's master plan, so FLU stands for future land use. So the master plan would be agriculture. The zoning is also agriculture, AR agriculture, with a 5-acre minimum. This would be a conventional layout. You get about 13 lots, 5 acres each. A property owner could do simple land divisions in this case. So what that means is there's 3 ways you can divide property. There's simple land divisions, there's a platted subdivision, there's a site condo. Simple land divisions is the easiest way to divide property. And it's done administratively. It's actually just done here downstairs at the township offices. You wouldn't have to come to the planning commission. The only thing they would have to come to the planning commission here for is the private road. And so the road that you see hooking to the north and then to the west would be, it could be a public road, but let's assume it's a private road because that would be the most inexpensive way to build this. And so you would have a developer who would come in with a private road. We would review the private road, but that's all we would review as a planning commission. Otherwise, the divisions could just be made to the assessor and to the zoning administrator, and they could be approved. So this would be the easiest, quickest way a property owner, if they just wanted to get some splits, they could get some splits, generate some income on their property, sell home sites. This, however, now there's assumptions. All the examples I give you are maximum examples. So this assumes that soils are good enough for 13 home sites for septic systems, that there's well locations, and that there's no really significant natural feature here, like a big wetland or something that couldn't be developed to a certain degree. Yeah.
Even if soils aren't good, you could always do an engineered field for septics, right?
Yeah, but soils still have to be decent, though. Yeah. So we're assuming on this case assumes adequate septic, so however you get there, adequate septic facilities. So well and septic, so you get 13. So an 80-acre parcel, you get 13 big lots. By the way, this would not be something we would recommend. This is the bad example of development where you've got a house on 5 acres, and some of these people might then maintain 5 acres in lawn, or who knows what they're doing. This is not what we want. And so, but you could do it, and we couldn't really stop anyone from doing it because this is allowed based on the Land Division Act. So next step, and we're going to get progressively more dense on this 80-acre parcel based on master plan and zoning and some of the options that we have available to us in Northfield Township. So this is the base 13-unit density. Now, same 80-acre parcel. In this particular case, again, master planned ag, zoned ag. This is now an open space project. So this is a project that allows for some density bonus if a developer was to maintain 50% open space. This actually scales out at 50% open space. Again, this is just an example. Of course, a developer would probably do something much more creative or maybe less creative. But in any event, this would represent 50% open space with what our ordinance now allows in open space developments is 150% density bonus if you're able to accommodate 50% open space plus some other things. So assuming the developer could get his total density bonus of 150%, you could get about 30 lots on a piece of property, zoned agriculture, planned agriculture, and we estimate, just our little calculation we did here, indicated these could be 1-acre lots. Now on 1-acre lots, as someone mentioned, I don't know if it was Brad or Howard mentioned today, the health department, generally speaking, allows septics to go on 1-acre lots. So if this again had great soils, minimum lot size for septic, if this project had great soils, you could get, in theory, 30 homes on septics on 1-acre lots without having to change the zoning or have to deal at all with the master plan. And you could do this. In this case, now you do have to take the jump, and now it's in front of the planning commission because, one, it's an open space project, which is a conditional land use, and so so now there's a public hearing involved, and we get more. We as the planning commission in the township get more involved in this process, and you can't just do simple land divisions now because you're beyond the number that's allowed in the Land Division Act. So now you have to develop this as either a site condominium, which is probably what 99% of all new residential development is going to be in Northfield Township, or it could be a platted sub. Platted subs just don't, people aren't doing them because it takes way too long to get through the process. So pretty much most residential development is going to be a site condominium. So in any event, you'd have to do site condo. This assumes maybe good well and septic, or a private on-site community septic system, or POCSS is what the county health department calls them. And they would be involved, the county would then be involved with permitting the POCSS. Our ordinance allows them, but we push that permitting off on the county. And so we would review the site plan, we would review the circulation, we would review all of those things that go into this, make sure it meets our open space project standards. But when it came to the on-site sewage plant, that's an option, it's an option allowed in our ordinance, they would have to meet the county standards. Yep.
What's the 150% based on what you could have gotten with 5 acre
Yes.
zoning? So it's 80 divided by 5 gives you 16?
Yeah, well, the previous, so it's 150% more than this. So that times 150%, yes. Add on to that number, because 100% is double, so,
Added to that?
yeah, added to that. Yep.
So 13 times 1.5 plus 13.
Yeah, so it's 150% more, because 100% more is twice as much, right? If you have 100% of one, it's 2. So 100% more of 13 is 26, plus another 50% is whatever that is, 30. So, so this is what you get with your density bonus, or you could potentially get in the ag zone with no changes to our, to the master plan or the zoning or anything. So now let's look at, again, assuming there's no giant wetlands or things like that, which really could throw things off, by the way. So let's get into now, if we went to different scenario, different master plan category with a different corresponding zoning designation. So the master plan category in this case would be LDR, low density residential. The corresponding zoning category is LR, which is low density residential with a 2 acre minimum. So that's the same category for, same number of lots between the master plan and the zoning ordinance. We have a 2 acre lot layout. This is a conventional 2 acre lot layout. Each one of those lots is 2 acres. You get about 32 of them. In this case, because these are actually turn out to be about, well, these are 2 acres each, so in theory, if you had great soils, you could still do a well and septic. Or if they didn't have such great soils, you could do a private on-site sanitary system. So again, you're doing a site condo or platted subdivision. Again, this is not a desirable solution because this is, the whole property is now being used in lots and yards, and it would be, our master plan and our zoning advocates for open space projects that would cluster these developments. But this is a key, this is key like the others because we have to know what's our starting point. What's the starting point in a conventional development that would be zoned LR? So now we get into the same thing, zoned LR, master planned LR, 80 acres. This sketch here represents what we call a yield plan or a parallel plan. The LR is a little different than some of the other zoning districts in that it allows you to calculate density if you're doing an open space project based on 1 acre lots. So it's as many 1 acre lots as you could get in here is the number of lots you could get for an open space project in the LR district. So we calculate, in the area up to the north of this, if up was north, we just calculate for like stormwater detention. There's got to be something taken away for storm detention and things like that. Again, just an example, just so you kind of get a feel for density. So in this particular case, in a project without municipal sewer service, you get that calculation if it's an open space project and you have 50% open space, you can calculate the total number of lots. This is the key, is the density. at 1 acre lots. So we don't really want 1 acre lots, but if a developer has an 80 acre parcel and they want to see how many they can get, they've got to provide a plan like this that shows how many 1 acre lots you can get, and then they would convert that to something like this. And so in the previous example you saw 55 lots is what we could get. So then they convert this to 55 lots on 80 acres with 50% open space. This gets the lots down to about a half acre with 50% open space. Now, because we're at a half acre, we're away from the potential of on-site septic, and so now we have to, the only way this works at this point is with a private on-site community septic system.
There's no bonus here.
Well, there is a bonus, because the bonus is LR is a 2 acre minimum, straight. If you are going to do an open space project with 50% open space, you can calculate, for the purposes of density, is what the ordinance says, you can calculate the number of 1 acre lots you could get on the same property. And so that gets you up to 55 instead of 32 if you were to develop it conventionally. So there is a bonus for LR.
Well, the other bonus is less roads, less sewer.
Yes.
and less cost.
Exactly, and that's definitely the main benefit of a cluster project. One, let's assume the north part of this project was a beautiful woodland that we didn't want to be touched. Well, that's really the purpose for a cluster, is that you would leave that woodland open. Maybe there's some wetlands up there, or who knows what, steep slopes, something that you want to preserve. And so the whole idea of a cluster is that you cluster the homes on the part of the property that's least sensitive, and you leave open the part of the property that's the most potentially sensitive. So again, I'm sure that the Planning Commission, because I didn't even, and once we started putting this together, this became quite apparent to me that there's quite a bit more density potential, even with property zoned LDR or LR, and even the ag zoning as far as that goes. So this was a little eye-opening. I kind of did the calcs on that table I gave you, and this follows that pretty closely. But this is a little eye-opening to me as well. So now the final thing in the LR, there's 3 different ways you can do density in the LR. This is if you were on municipal sewer. So if you're in municipal sewer in the LR district, well, remember the one layout was to figure a 1 acre lot size. Well, in the LR on sewer, if you're within the sewer service district, you can come up with this yield plan or a parallel plan showing 33,000 square foot lots, which is a little under an acre. So you're going to get more homes. In fact, we figure in this case with a 33,000 square foot lot, now this is zoned LR, a developer could get somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 homes. And then if you do an open space project, now we're down to quarter acre lots, 81 homes, quarter acre lots, still 50% open space. And so really what we're trying to do is preserve open space here. Really the density between 81 and 52 becomes much less, or 55 becomes really less relevant. In fact, if you drove through the subdivision, you might not even be able to tell that these are half acre lots as opposed to quarter acre lots. So this is with sewer service zone. This is how the ordinance is currently written. So this is again, just an example. These numbers would likely go down in the real world once they start calculating for natural features on a site, but I just wanted to again show you total possible density. Now the last example is MDR, and this is just straight quarter acre lots. So future land use, this would be medium density, SR1 would be the designation. This is a quarter acre lot minimum. If you remember in this example, we got down to quarter acre lots, but you still had to base your density on this. In this case, we got down to half acre lots, but you had to base your density on this. In this case, when in the MDR example, it's simply quarter acre lots, and that's the density. Now you could still do, I don't have another example after this, but I just wanted to get to this point and show you the potential numbers. So now we're up to about 188 lots or so on a property zone MDR, same number of acres. So you've got 80 acres, you're up to 188 units. And even in this case, we would likely advocate that the applicant cluster in some manner. This would likely not look like this in the final analysis, but the advantage for the developer, obviously, to have an MDR zone piece of property is they've got a lot more density to work with. They've got 180 or say 170, 180 units, however many they could get there, and then they can configure those in hopefully a more creative way, where when you get under the LDR, you're limited to 81, you can be creative with that, and then without sewer, you're limited to 55, and then standard 2 acre, you're at 32, and then again, the ag open space, it's 30. And then the standard is 13. So you can see the progression that we're discussing the master plan, and it's good to kind of get these numbers in your head of what the implications might be, and or the potential for a certain piece of property with and without sewer, based on our open space, based on all of those factors. So I don't know if I hope this helps a little bit. It helped me when I did it. I also have one other thing that's kind of related to this. Mark asked, and I think a couple other commissioners asked for, I feel like Phil Donahue walking around here with a mic. Yeah, Mark asked for, and I've got a big board I'll talk about here. I'll leave one for Howard as well. Oh, and I'll grab them for Larry too. Camera, can you get this or not? So you guys have the drawing, and basically there was a request to look at what amounted to be kind of development patterns, I think is kind of what we're looking at here. What were the development patterns along US 23, and sort of how does Whitmore Lake and the Northfield Township area relate to the development patterns on 23, really from M14 to the south to 96 to the north. And this is a map provided by the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments that is the existing land uses. So this map shows really land use patterns, and you can see what you should be looking for if you're interested in like residential density or commercial. Residential density particularly would be looking for the yellows and the oranges on this map. Commercial would be the red, and then the blues for industrial and that sort of thing. So I know this because the scale got so big, because it's such a big area, it is admittedly a little hard to see some of the things, but you can see kind of a pattern of residential development. Well, of course, you see it around Horseshoe Lake in Northfield Township, and then around Whitmore Lake, and then as you get north, up towards into Green Oak Township and into Brighton, that gets much more pronounced. And so there obviously is a more residential development that is occurring in the US 23 corridor, particularly as you head towards Brighton. Not as much as you head south. Of course, if you look at the M14 intersection, yes, there is obviously development there. But this is, again, hopefully something that can help you guys think about as we get into this more detailed discussion of the master plan, and how I know we were concentrating our conversation with the area at Whitmore Lake, down to Joy Road, but perhaps we look at more of this as a global view now of the township and kind of the surrounding communities. And so I wanted to present that. I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this at this point. If there's any questions, I can try to answer about the data or anything. This data is a little bit dated, because SEMCOG changed the way they present this information. And yeah, they now, the information SEMCOG now has is much less useful, because the map now, the colors, this is based on actual land use, based on aerial photographs and things like that. And even though the data is a bit old, it does give you an idea of what's going on here on the corridor. SEMCOG now uses assessing data, and it's very, the map makes no, in my opinion, the map makes no sense. And it looks like there's wide swaths of residential property when you know there's nothing there. It looks like there's wide swaths of commercial property when you know there's nothing there. But they put together their new maps that I don't even put in our master plans. I still try to use this. It's just not useful. And I printed one out today, and I didn't even bring it because it's just not helpful. And it looks like, you know, almost the whole township is residential, and everywhere in this whole map is almost residential and commercial and industrial. So in any event, this is a good, I hope this is a good starting point. There may be additional sources out there that we can bring into this as we get deeper into this discussion. But this is really kind of the first step in this. And I was kind of encouraged even to be able to stitch this all together with the surrounding communities. SEMCOG, while I don't like the way they currently do existing land use using assessing data, they do have an awful lot of data layers that we can use. And if you let me know what you want to see, we can probably light that up on a map like this. Is there a public site? We have access to all the, no, I don't think you can get to it. You have to, I'm sure we have some kind of subscription, I'm sure, with them. Yeah.
Well, aren't we Northfield Township a member of SEMCOG? Or did the board not want that? Howard? Howard's, you're a member of SEMCOG?
Township is a member.
Okay, so then we should be able to get whatever we want.
I get information like this from them all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would think as board members, we could also.
Huh?
As planning commission members, we can also do that?
I would just ask that you request it to Doug, and he'll
Sure.
ask him for it.
Okay.
Yeah. But we have our data is all based on our GIS system. You know, it's not just the information you get, it's all in our GIS system.
Okay.
So, but in any event. So again, starting point, we're just starting this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We can probably make this a little more detailed if I know exactly what you want. Email me and we can tweak this up a bit.
Okay. Is that your all done? Okay. I have something in relation to this sort of map that the Huron River Watershed Council has received an Americana grant where they help communities put together the natural green infrastructure in their communities, and a lot of times this is useful to the master plan process. Right now they're working with Webster Township, and they have worked with Dexter Township to put together this map, which is kind of like a base layer, if you'd consider that, in when you're looking at your master plan and where you want development to go, so you can understand where the higher priority wetlands and woodlands are. And they've offered to work with us to put together a plan for Northfield Township. If we want to take them up on that offer, it doesn't cost us anything, and but they've made that offer. So I'm just bringing that up to see what kind of interest there is on the board here for them to do that for us. Of course, one or two, or maybe some citizens might want to be involved with that also, but that's an opportunity we have.
Is it like in the manner of a presentation, or?
Yes, they can actually come and give a presentation on how they do it. So if there's interest in that, I'll see if I can set that up, and maybe they could stop into one of our next meetings and get that done. They need to get busy on the project between April and May, and they would have it completed by September if we're interested in doing that. So otherwise, they'll offer it to another community. And, as far as I'm concerned, we might as well take it. If it's free, yeah. All right, so I'll ask them to give us a presentation, if everyone's good with that? Okay. All right, great, and then we can decide absolutely if we want them to do it. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Doug, that was very good. All right, any more questions before we move on? Okay, moving on to minutes. And I had quite a few corrections, but I'll let you all name yours first. We'll start on page 1. Does anybody have any comments on this page? Okay, my comment is that under 8A, I believe it was a voice vote instead of a roll call vote, and there's a few of these like that, to open the public hearing.
Oh,
We don't usually do voice votes for that, so, I mean, roll call votes for that, so change that. Page 2, does anyone have any comments on page 2?
I just had a question, and I could
Go ahead.
be remembering incorrectly, but under the second column, under the conditions for the site plan submission last Friday, it is bullet point number 2 regarding the parking aisle between 2 rows of parking is only 16 feet. It says 24. Did I remember that it was actually 22?
It's 22.
Okay.
Yeah, 22. Okay. My other changes to that page, in the first column, we have the motions at the bottom of the first column. They were both voice vote. And then the last paragraph on the second column, this was a Mark Stanalajczo comment, but it says Stanalajczo asked where 2 doors on the south side of the addition lead, and actually that's, I believe it's the west side of the building where there's some steps and those 2 funny doors.
No, there was 2 doors on the south side there.
Going to a deck, yeah.
Oh, going to it, okay. As,
It was on the west side, but
Is it-
I asked that specifically to look like there was 2 doors and there were windows
okay.
on the south side.
Okay, so that's different than the doors I was thinking of. Okay. Then that's not a correction. Page 3, 9A, where it says proposed master plan amendment, and you were talking, Mark, that you noted in a June 4th Planning Commission that the Planning Commission directed the planning consultant to begin work on amending the master plan. We actually asked him to start the process, which is, I would think, I don't know, in my mind, feels different than begin work on. So are you okay?
That's what I said, so.
That's just what you said. But when the public reads it, it's not exactly what we said when we actually.
So I mean, it's really just a comment of what I said, so I don't know.
Okay,
Correct?
I'll leave it, but it's not accurate.
It's accurate what I said.
It's accurate to what you said, but it's not accurate to what we asked him to do, so. Okay, page 4. It's Iaquinto said Mr. Stolman, and that's the first real paragraph on the first column. And then 2, 3, I think it's the third sentence. Lewan added that a request for a rezoning would have been different from the master plan designation, and he would not have recommended that to the applicant or the commission. Instead of the word that, it's and. And then the second column, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7th paragraph, it should say the last part of the sentence, but some updating to reflect the new codified code references is needed. Should be some updating is needed. So we need an is in there. And then Brian Rubel's name, right above 10D, is spelled differently. It's, okay,
Oh,
yeah,
problem.
yep. And then that's all I have. Does anyone have any more changes? Okay, can we have a motion to adopt the minutes as corrected?
I move to adopt the minutes of the meeting for February 18th, as amended and corrected.
Support.
Okay, motion by Mr. Stanalajczo, support by Ms. Chick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Okay. Now, okay, now we have an opportunity for call to the public. Does anyone want to come and speak to us tonight?
David
Hi.
Gordon, 5558 Helena Road. Hello.
Hello.
I was very happy to hear the planning chair say that she really likes and supports the master plan. That was great to hear. I know that there are many other members of the planning commission who feel the same way. The cost for doing the last master plan rewrite review was $35,000, which was about $10,000 more than what was originally budgeted, just so you know. The township has already agreed, the board has agreed to pay $25,000 already to Tetra Tech to find out what the status is of our sewer capacity, which I thought was kind of shocking since Tetra Tech's been the engineers for this community for 40 years. It would seem to me that if they've been doing it for that long, they should be able to open a drawer and find out what our capacity is at this point. So that's kind of upsetting. Now you're considering thousands of more dollars to go through the process of reviewing the master plan. Again, I saw in the minutes of the, or on the agenda, that you had done a survey of the committee members and commissioners, and that the number one priority of the planning commission is reviewing the master plan, which is kind of surprising to me because, as Mr. Cousineau said, had Biltmore not walked in here, I don't know that that would be what your priority was at this point, since you just finished less than 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago, redoing the master plan. So it begs the question, who is creating the agenda for the master plan, or for the planning commission? Is it Biltmore? Is it outside developers that are creating our agenda, or is it the people who live here creating the agenda? And it seems to me that when a developer walks in, there's no obligation necessarily to take their request and go to the links that this planning commission is going to. There was a lot of talk about what consideration we want to put forward. You know, how about taking things into consideration? What I'd like everybody on the planning commission to take into consideration is the people that already live here who have spoken out about this particular Biltmore plan and the master plan. I presented petitions with everybody who lives in the area that you're talking about. There was nobody in favor of this plan. There was an online petition that we presented as well with more than 100 signatures. I would really like to encourage Doug, who I have a lot of respect for, to try to refrain from framing this as a growth versus no growth issue. The people that come up to speak, myself included, are not coming up here saying we want no growth. We're saying we want growth in the areas that it's designated in the master plan because we went through that process. So a lot of time is being spent by the planning commission, as far as I can see, talking about development. There is probably an understanding within the planning commission that a lot of people in this community are as in favor of preservation as they are of growth. And I'd like to see more presentations being requested by the planning commission to deal with how we can preserve open space, what the value is of open space, how we can promote farming in our community, and represent the members of the community who find that to be their priority, not just development and more development. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, comments from the commissioners. Mr. Roman?
Thank you. quite an ambitious agenda tonight, but I'm just going to touch upon a couple things from earlier. Perhaps we could get some information, or maybe bring it up for another meeting, about some infrastructure alternatives or sewer alternatives to the limited revision area. There may be some, as I've heard from Mr. Fink tonight, that there was some other possibilities, so maybe we could get some information regarding that in the future. The traffic, I hope it's based on the proposed MDOT improvements, you know, not the currently. Obviously, we know there's going to be some improvements made, so that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kuzno?
One thought that came to mind after we closed our discussion was, if you remember, the petitioner for the amendment to the master plan specifically stated the reason he looked for that area was because of the Ann Arbor School District. And it appears to me that Ann Arbor schools are becoming a school of choice. Is this true or not? So I think that they are opening up some of that. I'm pretty sure that they are. That being said, that kind of takes away the onus of having that area be the target area for future development necessarily. Now, I don't know how long that's going to stay. You know, if their numbers are down, then that's what they're going to be doing to try to get their numbers up, and then they shut the door at some point in time. But I'm just saying that there is, anyway, it's just a point that I just thought it'd be worth finding out the real answer to that question, but I'm aware that there is some openness to school of choice, and therefore that area doesn't have to be targeted as such.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Stanalajczo?
I don't have anything
No
to say.
comments? Okay. Ms. Chick?
I guess a couple of things. I also agree with Marlene, and Doug, he made a comment earlier, I'll go there first, that hindsight is 20/20. And those of us that did the last master plan update, including Mr. Iaquinto, we are very happy with the product at the end of it. It was a great process. I do want to make a comment, though, and I asked Mr. Iaquinto if he remembered it the same way I did, but very close to the end of the process from the subcommittee side of it, we actually had that quadrant of the township zone with higher density. And at the very last meeting, we pulled back from it because we were trying to create more of a transition from what we saw in Webster Township as ag area and what we saw in Ann Arbor as an ag area. Since then, however, we've seen their ag, as far as density goes, is much different than ours. So I think it's worth another look. And the other was, you know, hindsight is 20/20, and people that are looking back now and say we should have done this and we should have done that. At the time we did it, it was perfect for the time that we did it. So yeah, I have an issue with people saying it's wrong. I think it's kind of adversarial, and I don't think we need to be negative about it. And the other thing was the sewer study. I know it's costly, but it's something that needed to be done. And the information that they had on file when you said, you know, you could just open up a drawer and look, was actually old. And things have changed since then, and we found out some things since then that actually needed to take another look, regardless of whether Biltmore was coming in to ask for an amendment or not. So it's actually a really good thing that we're doing this right now. So that's all I have.
Great, great. Well, I appreciate the thoroughness of all of you, you know, especially Janet. She spends a lot of time looking up stuff, yes, and she's very, very thorough, and then the rest of you too, pouring into the documents, and I appreciate the many different viewpoints, you know, because we have some great expertise here. So anyway, thank you, keep involved, and I appreciate the community listening, and I'm sure they did tonight. And just like to mention now that our next regular meeting is March 18th, and we'll be here. Don't quite know what the agenda is yet, but we'll work that out. And so motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Chick, support by Roman, to To adjourn, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Thank you very much, everyone.